Hello, welcome to Record Time. Record Time is a weekly Akashic experience where we explore simple and mysterious themes through the lens of the Akashic Records. My name is Mina. I'm super excited to be here with you, and I'm excited to dive into the topic this week. So, this week, the Akashic Records are sharing perspective on the spectrum of worthiness. And before we dive into it, I just want to remind you that this is simply one perspective, and it's totally up to you whether you want to receive it or release it based on what feels good to you. So, with all of that, let's dive in. So, we can imagine that there's a spectrum of worthiness, and perhaps at one end, there's a sense of deep unworthiness or even worthlessness. That might sound like, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve anything. This is too good to be true. Whatever. You might get the vibe of that, the gist of that. And on the other end of this spectrum that we're musing on is almost like hyper-worthiness, right? Where it's like, I deserve everything. I deserve anything that I want, everything that I want. And there's almost this like kind of exuberant quality where your sense of worth is being exuded out into the space, right? It's like felt. It's like a big presence. It's a big sense of worthiness. And that might, again, sound like, I deserve it. I'm worth it. I deserve everything that I want. I'm absolutely worthy of my desires. I'm worth it. I'm worth it. I'm worth it. And maybe you're familiar with both sides of both sides of the spectrum. Maybe you've spent some time in both places, and I imagine all of us have spent time in between these spaces, because again, these are the extremes. So maybe there's a mix, there's a blend, and maybe in some areas of your life you tend to be more towards one side, and in other places in your life, in other moments in your life, you're more attuned to this sense of of worthiness instead of worthlessness. So, right, we have this spectrum. And the thing about this spectrum is that you can learn how to be at any point on this spectrum, right? Inside this perspective that we're playing in. You can learn, you're either taught or you can decide to learn where on the spectrum you want to sit. So worthiness is a skill that you can learn, and there's so many people that teach on this really brilliantly, right? Where they teach kind of like it almost feels like mindset work, right? It's like mindset work, changing your beliefs, changing the things that you think, and changing the way you speak to yourself internally. All of that, it feels like that's like very akin to learning the skill of feeling worthy in different areas of your life. And we can also be taught or teach ourselves to, or train ourselves to kind of linger or dwell in the space of worthlessness. That could be something that we were taught that we didn't choose to learn, right? That we're very innocent in our tendency to sit on this end of the spectrum. Perhaps that was the story that we were told about ourselves. And so that's just what's stuck with us. And that there's no blame in that. That's not your fault if you're sitting on this side of the spectrum by any means. There's a lot of innocence sitting there. And it's just like the repetition. That's the story of like, oh yeah, I don't deserve this. And right in the extreme end, it can be really painful. It can be really like full of despair. And again, there's like a lot of space. There's a whole gradient in between these two spaces. And right, you can choose, you can use your will to decide where you want to be. So if you tend to be more on the side of unworthiness, you can decide through your will and force your way almost onto this side of worthiness. And again, I want to be clear that this is one way to look at it. So you can teach yourself, you can train yourself to feel a deeper sense of worthiness and train your mind to think that way. And what the records are offering us is a third way, something that we can imagine either sits in the middle of the spectrum or even exists outside of this spectrum completely, where it's not this question of worth, actually. Do I deserve this thing or do I not deserve this thing? Am I worth this thing or am I not worth this thing? And instead, nothing wrong with either of those two places or that kind of way of being. But in this third way that they're showing us, it's almost a place of organic harmony, a space where you're resting inside your most natural way of being, and the fact that you are already here. And so inside the reality that I am already here, taking up space, breathing the air, drinking the water, eating, right, the food of the earth. I'm already here, taking up the space and using these resources. That's a fact. And so resting inside that very grounded reality of being a physical being, taking up space and consuming resources, inside that fact, from that place of reality, there is no question of, am I worth it? There's no question of, do I deserve to drink this water? Do I deserve this breath of air? Do I deserve to eat food and feel nourished? There's no question of that. There's no need to convince your mind that you're worth it in order to do it. You are just doing it. And the really beautiful thing about this third space, this third way of relating to worth, and really the way of relating to worth here is to not really relate to this question of, am I worthy? It's instead dropping into the reality that I am already here. I exist. I am alive. I am already here. And this is hard to put into words because it's so closely attuned to our beingness, just our existence, without anything, without having to prove your worth, without having to do something to then become worthy of something, without having to show or to earn something, without having to do something in order to deserve something. It's completely existing outside of that. It's more like dropping into your natural, organic place in the ecosystem that you already exist inside of. And so while there's absolutely nothing wrong with the spectrum of worthiness and unworthiness and learning to transcend or to move yourself across the spectrum to wherever you want to be inside that spectrum of worth, we can also choose to move that spectrum aside just for a moment even, and begin to imagine, muse on this third way that does not even involve this question of, am I worthy? It's not a question because you're so deeply rooted in the natural, organic reality of, I am here. I eat, I breathe, I drink water, I sleep. I don't have to do anything to earn those things because it just is in my nature to do those things, to be those things. And so the invitation here, and again, this is kind of just like a glimpse at this third way, and I know that this wasn't the best way to capture it in words, but I imagine they might have more to share on this with us in the future, and it might be more articulate then. But the invitation here is to, if you feel like you're getting exhausted with this endeavor of becoming worthy, of cultivating your own self-worth, because that can be tiring. I know for me, it's quite tiring to sustain that at times. If you're noticing you want to break from that, then for 1 minute, what would it be like to drop into this space of organic harmony, your natural way of being? There's a cat taking up space and meowing. What would it be like to drop into that natural harmony, to that place of, I am already here, and this is just how I am? And what would it be like to set aside the question of, am I worthy or am I not worthy? And instead just attune to your most natural way of being. And maybe that doesn't make sense, and it's okay if it doesn't. All this is an invitation to begin to open your awareness to another way of existing. And just by musing on this, by letting it sit in your imagination for 10 seconds at a time, you'll start to open your awareness to that possibility entering your own lived experience. It becomes more possible when you play with this idea, when you play with the perspective of something. It becomes more possible for you to actually experience it. So if it sounds appealing to you to, even for a moment, live outside of the question of worth and proving something and deserving something or not deserving something and earning something, and if it feels good to rest inside your own nature, then you're invited to contemplate this. Okay. I'd love to know what this sparks in you and how you understood this, and if this inspired something in you. I'd love to hear it. This is quite a new perspective for me, and so I'd love to be in dialogue with you about this. If you feel called to leave a comment on this or to send me a message through my website, ninarucci.com, I would love to hear from you. Okay, until next time, I'm wishing you well. Namaste.